Hey everybody, welcome to the final part. At least I think it's going to be the final part. Let's see how it goes. Of the Dwarfie Stane. Now, it's a bit windy outside. I've had to come outside to record today. It's a little bit windy. I hope you can hear me fine. We left the story. Harold had gone across to the island to Snorro. He'd bought the love potion, poured it into Lady Morna's drink, but she saw him. She didn't drink. She was not affected by the love potion, and instead she only pretended that she was affected by it. And Harold was very pleased by this, and he said to his mother, "Mother, it won't be long now before we have the royal wedding between myself and Lady Morna. She loves me now, with a little help from a visit to my friend Snorro." And then his mother smiled knowingly. She knew what he'd done and she approved of it. She thought it was a good thing. And she told the lady Countess Frau Kirk also, and they both sniggered and laughed about this. Meanwhile, Lady Morna went around her business with a happy face and a smile on her face, the whole time worried about what was going to happen to her next. In secret, she was meeting with Paul. And of course, they were truly in love with each other. And one night, as they were walking down the corridor, Lady Morna and Paul walking towards each other down the corridor, Countess Frau Kirk was in that corridor. She saw them coming and she hid behind a curtain. She was hidden behind a curtain. And she heard on the other side of the curtain Lady Morna and Paul speaking to each other. And it became very, very clear to Countess Frau Kirk that Lady Morna had not drunk the potion. She was not in love with Harold, but in fact she was in love with Paul. And this sent Countess Frau Kirk into a rage. And once they'd gone their separate ways, she slipped out from behind the curtain and made her way down to her sister and told her the whole story. And she was also in a fury. But she couldn't tell her son Harold. She didn't want to tell him because she thought it would upset him too much. So she, Harold's mother, decided to make the journey across the sea to the island, all the way up into the hills to the Dwarfie Stane, and meet Snorro, and there hatch an even more terrible plan. And that's what she did. She had the ship readied. She went down there in her ship with all her servants and her ladies in waiting and everything with her, and she went all the way down to the dockside, and they sailed across the bay, and Snorro, standing at his doorway, saw the ship coming. And he knew who was coming. Snorro knew everything before it happened. And he cackled to himself and shuffled off into his Stane. And it wasn't long before he heard the horses ride up outside, neighing and snorting and pawing at the ground with their hoofs. And he heard the voice of the Dowager Queen outside them, Harold's mother. "Dwarf, come out of your Stane immediately, I command you." "Ah, who is it outside that commands me so to come out of my Stane?" "It's I, the Dowager Queen. I command you to come out of your Stane now. Present yourself before me." "Present myself before you, you say? I think I'm quite comfortable here inside my Stane. I think I'll just stay in here for a while." "Dwarf, I..." And before she could speak any further, the black crow flew out and stood on this little stone in front of the Dwarfie Stane that you can see right next to me there. And it stared at the Dowager Queen. And she got down from her horse. "Look, dwarf, I don't know what kind of game you're playing in there, but I command you to come out..." Before she could get another word out of her mouth, the crow looked right at her, the large black bird. "Bow," it said. You know how people bow in front of a king or a queen like this? "Bow." And she stopped talking. She looked. Did that bird actually command her to bow? "Look, dwarf, you don't come out of the Stane..." "Bow," said the crow. Queen didn't know what to do, the Dowager Queen. She sent everybody away to save her embarrassment. And then, very quickly, she made a little bow in front of the dwarf. Dwarf, I've bowed. Please, will you come out? Say please, and I'll come out. Please, dwarf, I've bowed. Come out. And then Snorro came out, holding his mirror, looking at his beautiful face in the mirror. And then he looked up from the mirror, and he looked at the Dowager Queen. Oh, it's you, Your Majesty. What brings you all the way over here to visit me? What is it that you're after? The potion you sold my son did not work. Something was wrong with it. That potion worked just fine. It could be that she never drank it. That's why it took no effect. If your son was not clever enough to put it secretly in the drink, she would not have drunk it. The potion was fine, I tell you. The problem is my son, Harold. He must become king of the Orkneys. As you know, his older brother Paul is due to become king, being older. I must get rid of Paul. Get rid of Paul, you say? That sounds like some terrible deeds you're thinking up there. What did you have in mind? Well, we have to have some way of getting rid of him. It has to look like it just was an accident or something like that. I think I could be helping you with that. Come back in 2 weeks. All shall be arranged. Now be off with you. I've got things to do. And with that he sent her away and scuttled back into his Stane. She went back, and for 2 weeks it was a very tense atmosphere in the castle. Paul, still believing his potion was working, was looking intently at the Lady Morna for more and more signs that she was falling in love with him because of the potion. And she was doing her best to be friendly and smile, but she didn't really know what was going to happen next. She was kind of hoping that she could maybe leave Orkney and go back to the mainland, or take Paul with her back to the mainland. But that was not to be. 2 weeks later, the Queen set out again. The Dowager Queen set out in the boat, across the bay, all the way across to Snorro's Stane. The same thing happened. The same thing that happens to every person who goes to the Stane. If you command him to come out, he just refuses. He sends out his huge black bird. The bird commands you to bow. She went through it all again, begging Sorrow to come out of his cave. And when he came out, he brought out a beautiful piece of cloth. The cloth was all rolled up, and Snorro was wearing a pair of thick gloves as he handled the cloth. I've made this cloth for you. Yes, yes, cloth. What shall I do with a piece of cloth? This cloth is poisonous. Make this cloth into a jacket. Whoever would wear this jacket will not see the end of the day. What a cunning plan, she thought. She really was a cruel person. What a horrible thing to do, isn't it? Absolutely awful. Cunning plan, she said. Give me the cloth. And she reached up. No, don't touch the cloth yourself. Why you think I'm wearing the gloves? Said Sorrow. Here. And he had the Queen slip on the gloves. And she carefully carried the cloth all the way back to the ship. Put it in a box. Carried it all the way back to the mainland of Orkney. The big island. Took it all the way back to the castle at Kirkwall. And there she sat all night with the gloves on, cutting the cloth, sewing the cloth, and at the end, still holding the gloves, she held up the most beautiful jacket the world had ever seen. Beautiful, but terribly dangerous jacket, for she knew that no one should ever touch this material. I think we're going to have the fourth part of that story tomorrow. I think that's a good place to end the story today. what I said to you before. If your characters, if you've got a mean character like Harold, or is particularly his mother, the Dowager Queen, or Countess Fraukirk, you can't just say they were mean. They've got to be mean, okay? And in this story, that character is doing something very, very bad, okay? Really mean. And Paul and the Lady Morna, they're very kind and gentle. They're not doing any mean things, they're just being nice. Harold, I don't think he's as mean as the Dowager Queen, or certainly the Dowager Queen, or perhaps Countess Frauke, but he seems to just be unkind and that type of person. So when you've got your people in your stories, make sure they behave in the way that you say that they're going to behave. Okay, like at the beginning, I told you that Snorro the dwarf was very vain, looking at himself. He was very self-important. He thought he was more important than anybody else. And you can see that when anyone comes to visit him, even like a queen or an earl or something like that, he behaves as if he's way more important and special than they are. He does that to everybody, okay? So in your stories, you can have all these really cool characters, but make sure that you make them live and behave in the way that you described that they're going to be, okay? Can't just say one thing and have them behave a different way, basically, okay? So I hope you like this story. Remember, it's just a fairy tale, just a story. The Dwarfie Stane is real. You can go there. You can visit the Dwarfie Stane, and you can go inside and you can see Snorro's little chamber inside. But I'm not sure there really was a character called Snorro who lived there. I think that Stane goes back even further in time to people who lived very, very long time ago, okay? And it could be that the people of Orkney, the story of Snorro and the dwarf just grew up around the Stane. But if you go on the internet and type in Dwarfie Stane, you'll see a picture like the one next to me right there, and many other pictures of people visiting the Stane and people going inside. All right. So tomorrow we'll find out what happens once once the Dowager Queen brings the cloth back. She makes the coat, and she's going to have Paul wear this coat. Okay, which is really, really a nasty thing to do. Let's see what happens then. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.